suspect!
Coming to get you, Bobber.
Walter's got Nards!
Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. I want to talk about the difference between horror movies and documentaries. Now it's a bit of a sarcastic video today because something that I always get messaged about is, with regards to horror movies, that couldn't happen. That's too unrealistic. No way that's happened. This movie is bad because a specific thing happened that wouldn't happen in real life. And with most of those people, I can understand where they're coming from. They want a realistic movie, and that's fine. That's the way they want it. But something that they're forgetting is it's not a documentary. And that's most of the replies. And if you're watching this video and I have replied to you, it's no offence, this is just my opinion. But the replies that I give to people is basically, this is a horror movie. It's not a documentary. Now, one of the biggest issues for me is I was born in the early 80s. I was born in 1983. So I grew up with 80s horror movies. I don't think I remember an 80s horror movie that's great that was realistic. You know, you've got Child's Play, Fright Night, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the Friday the 13th movies, even the Halloween movies. All these movies were horror movies. None of them were realistic. You've got Ghoulies, you've got Critters. There's, I've got so many movies from the 80s and the 90s, Candyman, etc. None of these movies are realistic. But when it comes to today, this is where people start to, become too judgmental of horror movies, because you do get your artistic horror movies, which are fantastic, but you've also got your artistic horror movies that are also unrealistic. It Follows, Hereditary, The Witch. None of these movies are realistic, yet they're praised because of their artistic look to them, and they're amazing movies. But when it comes to movies like Halloween from 2018, Halloween Kills, as much as I know that people didn't like Halloween Kills because of the dialogue, etc., I have read that some people don't like that movie specifically, and I'm not hating on anyone because it's Halloween Kills. I'm just giving Halloween Kills as an example. Some people hate Halloween Kills because Michael is 61 years old and he lifted up a firefighter with the halogen or whatever it was he lifted him up with. They don't like the movie because Michael Myers shouldn't be able to do that. Now, a real life 61-year-old probably can't do that. But this isn't a documentary. This isn't Making a Murderer on Netflix. This is a horror movie with a man who's known as the Boogeyman, The Shape. In 1978, he was shot. He fell over a balcony and disappeared. And through the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, and even the noughties, people loved that because it was a horror movie. We didn't question it. We just accepted it for what it was. But today, it's almost like if you don't fill in the plot holes, if you don't have an explanation for absolutely everything that happens in this horror movie, then it's classed as bad or unrealistic. And then you'll probably walk away from this unrealistic horror movie and go in and watch Fast and Furious 9 and think, wow, that's amazing, it's so realistic. And you're like, well, no, it's not. It's just as unrealistic, if not more unrealistic than these horror movies. Because Fast and Furious, I'm not knocking that, I'm just using it as an example. Fast and Furious is an action franchise, whereas horror movies are horrors. Anything can happen in a horror movie. That's why they're known as horror movies. You will get realistic horror movies that are mostly based on true stories, etc., like Zodiac, which is unbelievable. That's a horror movie that is very realistic. It doesn't have plot holes because it's only basing itself on the facts that they have. It's realistic because it doesn't have a murderous psychopath that can come back from the dead. It's a real life movie. It's a true movie that's based on real life. Halloween isn't based on real life. Candyman is not based on real life. Friday the 13th, Child's Play, all those movies are horror movies. If you can't enjoy a horror movie because it's too unrealistic, then you don't enjoy horror movies, you don't enjoy the horror genre, and you don't appreciate the horror genre. And I don't want to sound condescending, but horror movies, there's no rules. Anything can happen. There will be plot holes in horror movies. There will be unrealistic scenarios in horror movies. There will be unrealistic scenarios in realistic horror movies. There will also be realistic scenarios in unrealistic horror movies. That's just what you get. You have to go in and enjoy it for what it is. If you want to go into a fictional horror movie hoping that it's going to be a realistic, you're probably not going to like it. So I guess this video is just basically a universal answer for those who ask me, why do you like these movies? They're not realistic. Well, that's the reason I like these movies, because they're horror movies. That's it. They're horror movies. Some horror movies are good, some horror movies are bad, but I would never call a horror movie bad. I would never call a fictional horror movie bad because it's unrealistic, because it's a horror movie. So what do you think, guys? Do you agree with me? Do you think that horror movies can have plot holes and they're still enjoyable? Do you think horror movies can be unrealistic and they're still enjoyable? Or do you think that they should be realistic? Now, like I said, if that's what you think, that's not the wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just a matter of opinion. But what's your opinion? Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think and let's talk about it.